I was hiding $40,000 in credit card debt from my wife, and the day she found those statements was the day our marriage nearly ended. My stomach dropped as I watched her face shift from confusion to betrayal. Years of trust shattered in seconds. In this video, I'm sharing the raw, unfiltered story of how financial secrets nearly cost me everything, and the exact system we used to rebuild both our marriage and our bank account. If you've ever kept money secrets from your partner, or suspect they're keeping them from you, this is the conversation you need to hear. The warning signs I completely missed. Ever wonder what red flags appear before financial secrets blow up your relationship? I missed every single one. Looking back, the signs were practically screaming at me, but somehow I managed to ignore them all. You'd think after 7 years of marriage, I'd notice when my wife's behavior around money started changing, but I guess denial is a powerful thing. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Weekend brunches with friends, annual vacations to the beach, and those cute little arguments about which Netflix show to binge next. But beneath that carefully maintained surface, strange money behaviors were popping up everywhere. I just wasn't paying attention. It started small. A missing credit card statement here, a sudden password change on our online banking there. Nothing that couldn't be explained away with a reasonable excuse. Oh, the mail must have gotten lost. Or, I changed all my passwords after that data breach in the news. And I believed every word because why wouldn't I? This was the woman I trusted with everything. Then came the defensive reactions whenever I brought up anything remotely related to money. One night over dinner, I casually mentioned that maybe we should start saving for a house down payment. What should have been a normal conversation turned into a tense exchange that ended with her snapping. Can we just enjoy one meal without talking about money? I remember thinking her reaction seemed extreme, but I chalked it up to a bad day at work. The weirdest moments were the physical reactions. Like when credit card commercials would come on TV, and she'd suddenly need to use the bathroom or remember something important in the other room. At first, I didn't connect these behaviors. They seemed random, isolated incidents. But looking back, the pattern is embarrassingly obvious. Then there were the basic money questions that turned into defensive standoffs. Hey, did you pay the electric bill? Would be met with, why are you always checking up on me? Or, don't you trust me to handle anything? These overreactions should have been giant red flags, but instead I started walking on eggshells, avoiding financial topics altogether just to keep the peace. As months passed, our disconnection grew. Conversations became surface level. Date nights felt forced. I noticed she was working late more often, and when she came home, she'd immediately check the mail before I could get to it. Sometimes I'd hear her taking phone calls in the bathroom with the shower running. If you're thinking this sounds like the behavior of someone having an affair, you'd be right, except her affair was with mounting debt, not another person. The secrecy created invisible walls between us. I'd rationalize everything. She's just private about money, or she's probably embarrassed about spending on something she thinks I'll judge. I made excuses because the alternative, that the person I trusted most was hiding something significant, was too painful to consider. What I didn't realize was how much financial stress was physically affecting both of us. She developed insomnia, tossing and turning beside me while I pretended to sleep. I noticed she was constantly checking her phone, jumping whenever it buzzed with notifications. Her temper grew shorter, and the smallest disagreements escalated into silent treatments that lasted for days. My own body was sending warning signals too. Tension headaches became my constant companion. I started grinding my teeth at night so badly that my dentist recommended a mouthguard. Our home, once our sanctuary, felt charged with an undercurrent of anxiety neither of us acknowledged. The intimacy that had once been effortless between us virtually disappeared. Not just physically, though that certainly took a hit, but emotionally too. You can't be truly intimate with someone when one of you is carrying a massive secret. Every conversation becomes a potential minefield. Every question possibly leading to the exposure you're desperately trying to avoid. Looking back, I'm amazed at how these behaviors perfectly mimic those of romantic infidelity. The secret of phone calls, the defensiveness, the emotional withdrawal, the late nights at the office. It's all from the same playbook. Financial infidelity follows the exact same patterns because it stems from the same place, betrayal, of trust and shame. What makes financial secrets particularly insidious is how easy they are to hide in plain sight. Society has trained us to avoid talking about money. It's considered impolite, uncomfortable, private. This social taboo creates the perfect cover for financial secrecy to thrive, even between two people who share a bed, a home, and supposedly a life. The lies of omission piled up between us. Not just her hiding financial information from me, but me pretending not to notice the growing distance. We were both complicit in maintaining the illusion that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I became an expert at ignoring the evidence right in front of me because facing it meant confronting a truth I wasn't ready for. As weeks turned into months, her behavior became increasingly erratic. Mail would mysteriously disappear. She'd become defensive about the most innocent questions. She set up a separate email account for work and was constantly clearing the browser history on our shared computer. She started making excuses to avoid social gatherings with our friends, particularly the ones who worked in finance or were good with money. I remember one night clearly. We were at a dinner party when someone mentioned their financial advisor. My wife knocked over her wine glass, creating enough of a distraction to completely change the subject. On the drive home, she was silent, staring out the window with a look of such profound sadness that I almost pulled over to ask what was really going on. But I didn't, because part of me was afraid of the answer. The physical toll continued to mount. She developed stress-induced eczema that she'd scratch until it bled when she thought I wasn't looking. I started having panic attacks for the first time in my life, usually when checking the mail or looking at our bank account. We were both suffering, separately but in parallel, connected by a secret only one of us fully understood. With each passing day, the tension in our home grew thicker. Simple decisions like where to eat dinner or what movie to watch became fraught with unspoken conflict. We stopped making future plans. Vacation discussions were shut down. Talks of starting a family were postponed indefinitely. Our relationship existed entirely in the present tense because the future was too frightening to contemplate. All these warning signs were building toward an inevitable breaking point. Something had to give. The human body and mind can only sustain that level of stress for so long before something breaks. For us, that breaking point came on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon with a certified letter I happened to collect from the mailbox before she got home. My $40,000 web of lies. The certified letter was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay $40,000 of debt I'd carefully hidden through a system that would impress professional con artists. What drives a person who genuinely loves their partner to construct such an elaborate financial house of cards? The answer might hit closer to home than you think. It started innocently enough. A few years into our marriage, I wanted to surprise my wife with a weekend getaway for our anniversary. Our savings account was looking pretty sad at the time, but I figured one small credit card charge wouldn't hurt. We had an amazing time, and seeing her so happy made the $1,200 charge seem completely worth it. I planned to pay it off over the next 2 months without mentioning it. But then my car needed unexpected repairs the following week. Another $800 on the card. No big deal, I told myself. I just need 3 months instead of 2 to clear the balance. This pattern continued, a new suit for job interviews, helping my brother through a rough patch, a laptop when mine died mid-project. Each purchase had a perfectly reasonable justification. I wasn't being frivolous. These were necessities or investments in our future, right? At least that's what I told myself as the balance crept upward. By the 6-month mark, I was juggling 2 credit cards with a combined balance of nearly $7,000. The minimum payments were starting to squeeze our monthly budget, which led to the next fatal step. I opened a balance transfer card with 0% interest for 18 months. Problem solved, or so I thought. This is where my financial deception transformed from a small snowball into an avalanche. With the breathing room of the balance transfer, I didn't address my spending habits. Instead, I now had 3 credit cards, and those original cards had fresh available credit again. When holiday season rolled around, I justified using them, just this once, since I had the balance transfer card under control. Before I knew it, I was opening new accounts every 6 to 8 months, transferring balances in an elaborate shell game. I'd memorized the promotional offer cycles of every major bank. I could tell you exactly which credit unions didn't report to all 3 credit bureaus. I became an expert at financial deception, just not at financial management. The logistics of hiding this growing web became increasingly complex. I created a separate email account for financial statements. I downloaded a special app that would alert me when mail was about to be delivered, so I could intercept anything suspicious before my wife saw it. I volunteered to handle bill payments, not out of helpfulness, but to control what she saw. I kept a detailed spreadsheet tracking payment due dates, minimum payments, and which accounts could still qualify for balance transfers. My browser history was meticulously cleared after each session, managing my secret financial life. I even had a separate phone passcode for banking apps that I kept hidden in a password-protected folder. But the most elaborate part of my deception wasn't the logistics. It was the mental gymnastics I performed to justify it all. I'm protecting her from unnecessary worry. I'd tell myself while lying awake at 3 a.m. calculating interest payments. She's already stressed about her job. This would just make things worse. My favorite self-deception was the hero narrative. I'll fix this before she ever finds out, and she'll never have to know how close we came to financial disaster. I cast myself as the noble protector, shouldering this burden alone. The reality? I was terrified of losing her respect and love if she discovered how badly I'd mismanaged our finances. The weight of carrying this secret was crushing. I developed a physical reaction to the mail truck. My heart would race and palms would sweat when I heard it approaching. Work calls became anxiety-inducing nightmares as I worried creditors might call during dinner. Every casual conversation about future plans or purchases became a minefield I had to carefully navigate. The shame was the worst part. Financial shame is uniquely isolating. It feels too personal to discuss with friends, too embarrassing to seek help for, and too threatening to admit to your partner. I felt like a failure as a husband, as an adult, as a provider. This shame created a terrible cycle. Feeling bad about myself led to occasional comfort purchases to feel better, which deepened the debt, which intensified the shame. The more the debt grew, the more impossible coming clean seemed. By the time it hit $20,000, I convinced myself that confession would definitely end our marriage. At $30,000, I believed it might actually be kinder to my wife to maintain the lie than to burden her with the truth. At $40,000, I was living in a constant state of dread, knowing it was only a matter of time before my house of cards collapsed. What I didn't realize then, but understand painfully well now, is that financial infidelity follows the same destructive pattern as any other form of betrayal. It starts small, with seemingly justifiable actions. It escalates gradually, each step making the next deception easier. The lies required to maintain the secret multiply exponentially. And the longer it continues, the more devastating the eventual discovery becomes. I'm not alone in this behavior, though it felt that way at the time. Research shows that approximately 70% of couples keep financial secrets from each other. A survey by the National Endowment for Financial Education found that 1 in 3 people who have combined finances with their partner have committed financial infidelity. The most common forms include hiding purchases, bills, or cash, like I did, keeping secret accounts, guilty, and lying about income or debt, check and check. The psychology behind financial secrecy is fascinating and disturbing. Studies show that people are more likely to lie about money than almost any other topic, even more than infidelity in some cases. Money represents not just purchasing power, but security, freedom, status, and self-worth. When we feel threatened in any of these areas, the impulse to hide financial problems can become overwhelming. My elaborate financial fabrications weren't just about the numbers. They were about protecting my ego, avoiding difficult conversations, and maintaining an image of competence. Every new credit card, every intercepted statement, every password change was another brick in the wall separating me from authentic connection with the person I loved most. I became hypervigilant, constantly monitoring my wife's access to financial information. I volunteered to check the mail daily. I installed a sophisticated alert system on my phone that notified me when bank statements or bills were about to arrive. I created elaborate stories about why certain expenses appeared on our joint account. The mental load of maintaining these deceptions was exhausting. Living with this kind of secret creates a peculiar form of loneliness. You're physically present, but emotionally isolated. I'd be sitting next to my wife on the couch, seemingly engaged in conversation, while mentally calculating how I'd cover the minimum payments that month. I'd laugh at a movie while my stomach churned with anxiety about the latest credit card statement sitting in my secret email account. The day everything fell apart, that emotional isolation couldn't last forever. And for me, it ended on a completely average Tuesday that would permanently divide my life into before and after. What's scarier than getting caught in a $40,000 lie? The quiet devastation in your partner's eyes when they realize they've been sharing a life with someone they don't actually know. I remember everything about that day with painful clarity. The weather was unseasonably warm for October, and I'd actually felt good that morning. My secret credit card payment had cleared. I'd managed to transfer some money between accounts to cover our mortgage, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That false sense of security is exactly why I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I was working from home that day when I heard the mail truck. My wife usually arrived home around 6, giving me plenty of time to intercept anything sensitive. But as I glanced out the window, I saw her car in the driveway. She'd come home early, something about a canceled meeting, and had already collected the mail. When I walked into the kitchen, she was standing at the counter, an opened envelope in her hand, her face unnaturally still. It was a credit card statement I'd been waiting for, one I'd planned to intercept. One that showed not just the current balance, but a detailed payment history going back months. "What is this?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "This says we have a platinum card with a $22,000 balance. We don't have this card." I opened my mouth to spin another lie. Some story about identity theft or a banking error. But the words wouldn't come. After years of deception, my body simply refused to produce another lie. Instead, I said nothing, which was confession enough. I watched as understanding dawned across her face. She started digging through the stack of mail, finding another statement I'd missed. Then she looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget. Not anger, but something worse. Complete bewilderment, as if she was looking at a stranger who had somehow been living in her house. "How many more are there?" she asked. That question broke something in me. Not because of its accusation, but because of its simplicity. Not "how could you?" or "what were you thinking?" Just a straightforward request for the truth, finally. "5 cards," I said, my voice barely audible. "And a personal loan." She sat down slowly at our kitchen table, the statements spread out before her. "How much?" "About 40,000. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute passed before she spoke again. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said, and those 9 words cut deeper than any screaming match could have. Because they were true. I had become someone else, a person who lied daily to the person I loved most. What followed wasn't the dramatic blow-up you might expect. There was no thrown glassware, no slamming doors. Instead, there was something far more devastating, a profound, weighty silence that seemed to fill every corner of our home. She didn't cry or yell. She simply gathered the statements, walked to our bedroom, and closed the door. That night, I slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't bear to lie next to her, knowing what I had done. The next morning, she left for work without waking me. The only sign she'd been there was a notepad on the kitchen counter with a single question written on it. Why? Financial betrayal creates a unique kind of relationship trauma. It's not just about the money. It's about the systematic deception that makes your partner question every memory, every moment you've shared. Each time I'd said, "I can't afford that right now," or "let's save for that vacation," became suspect. Each financial decision we'd made together was now tainted by the knowledge that I'd been operating from a completely different reality than the one I'd presented to her. The days that followed exist in my memory as a blur of painful conversations. I revealed everything, every account, every debt, every lie I'd told to cover previous lies. I showed her the elaborate system I'd created to track payment due dates, the secret email accounts, the budgeting app on my phone that contained our actual financial situation. We lived like roommates for weeks. Polite, distant interactions about household necessities. "We need milk. The garbage needs to go out." Nothing more. The emotional connection between us seemed severed, perhaps permanently. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read. Not hatred, but something more complex. A recalculation of who I was and what our life together actually meant. At night, I'd hear her crying in our bedroom while I lay. Awake on the couch, the weight of my actions pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. The question that kept me awake wasn't whether she would leave me. I assumed that was inevitable, but how I had become someone capable of such prolonged deception. 3 weeks after that fateful Tuesday, she asked me to join her at the kitchen table. She had a legal pad covered in notes and figures. I assumed this was it, the division of assets, the untangling of our lives. Instead, she pushed the pad toward me. "This is everything," she said. "Every debt, every account I know about. Is there anything missing?" I studied the list, my shame growing with each line. She had meticulously documented everything I'd revealed. There were no gaps, no missing accounts. "That's everything," I confirmed. She took a deep breath. "I need to know if you're willing to fix this. Not just the money, us. Because I can't live with someone I don't trust. And right now, I don't trust you at all." That moment was the rock bottom I needed to hit. Not the discovery itself, but the realization that my actions had fundamentally broken something precious. The hurt in her eyes wasn't just about the debt. It was about the thousands of moments I'd chosen deception over honesty, chosen to carry my burden alone rather than trust in our partnership. Many relationships don't survive financial infidelity of this magnitude. The breach of trust is too severe, the damage too extensive. We were teetering on that edge for months. My wife moved into the guest bedroom. We started seeing a financial therapist who specialized in couples with money conflicts. Every conversation felt like walking through an emotional minefield. The turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no single grand gesture that saved us. Instead, it was my complete surrender to radical financial honesty. I gave her access to everything, every account, every password. I set up alerts that went to her phone whenever any account had activity. I started calling her before making any purchase over $50. At first, this transparency was about proving I could be trusted again. But over time, it became something more valuable, a genuine transformation in how I viewed money and our partnership. The walls I'd built to protect my financial shame began to crumble, and I found that honesty, however painful, was infinitely less exhausting than deception. The brutally honest conversation that saved us. While transparency was the first step, it took something far more vulnerable to truly begin healing our relationship. Ever notice how the hardest words to say are often the shortest? In our case, 3 simple words changed everything, and they weren't "I love you." That kitchen table conversation wasn't just awkward, it was terrifying. We sat across from each other like strangers, the neat stack of credit card statements between us like a physical manifestation of my betrayal. My wife's face was a mask of composed hurt. She'd done her homework, every account meticulously documented on a spreadsheet, color-coded by interest rate and minimum payment. The financial therapist had suggested this meeting, but knowing something is good for you doesn't make it any less painful. I came prepared with a mental script. I had explanations for everything. How the debt started with good intentions, how I was just trying to provide for us, how I planned to fix it all before she ever found out. I'd rehearsed these justifications until they almost sounded reasonable, to me anyway. But when my wife finally looked up from her spreadsheet and I saw the raw hurt in her eyes, every carefully crafted explanation evaporated. This wasn't about logical arguments or reasonable explanations. This was about broken trust. "I need help." Those 3 words weren't planned. They tumbled out of me like a confession, shocking us both with their simplicity and truth. No excuses, no deflections, just the naked admission that I couldn't handle this alone, that I'd never been able to handle it alone. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was necessary. My wife later told me it was the first truly honest thing I'd said about money in years. Not "I'm sorry," though I said that too countless times. Not "I'll fix this," another empty promise I couldn't keep. But "I need help." An admission that broke through my wall of financial shame and opened the door to actual communication. The financial therapist had given us a framework for these conversations. We'd take turns speaking for 5 minutes without interruption while the other person just listened, not planning their response, not mentally arguing, just absorbing what was being said. This technique seemed almost insultingly simple when she first suggested it, but in practice, it was revolutionary. When it was my wife's turn to speak, she didn't rage or accuse as I'd feared. Instead, she spoke about feeling excluded from our financial life, about how my secrecy had made her question everything else in our relationship. "Every time you hit a statement or changed the subject when I brought up money," she said, "it felt like you were building a wall between us brick by brick." The most painful moment came when she admitted she'd started looking for signs of an affair. "Financial infidelity follows the same patterns," she explained. "The secrecy, the defensiveness, the unexplained expenses. I convinced myself you were cheating because somehow that seemed less scary than facing our financial reality. When my 5 minutes came, I didn't defend or explain. I just talked about the shame, how it had grown alongside the debt until it became this monstrous thing that controlled all my actions. How each new lie felt necessary to protect the old ones, creating a prison of my own making. How lonely it felt carrying the secret. That first real conversation lasted hours, well beyond the structured time limits our therapist had suggested. By the end, we were emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. We hadn't solved anything concrete, but we'd established new ground rules for moving forward. 1. No financial decisions over $100 without consulting each other first. 2. No blame language when discussing past mistakes. 3. No interrupting when the other person is expressing feelings about money. 4. Weekly check-ins to review our finances together, no matter how uncomfortable. The most important rule, though, was creating what our therapist called a judgment-free zone around money conversations. This wasn't about pretending the betrayal hadn't happened or that my actions hadn't caused real harm. Rather, it was acknowledging that shame and judgment would only push us back into the patterns that had nearly destroyed us. Shame thrives in secrecy, our therapist explained. The antidote is compassionate transparency. We had to create a space where difficult truths could be spoken without fear of explosive reactions or silent treatment. Creating this judgment-free zone wasn't easy. It required constant vigilance against old patterns. My tendency to get defensive, my wife's impulse to withdraw when conversations got difficult. We developed a simple safe word, reset, that either of us could use when we felt the conversation slipping into blame or shame territory. This would signal a 5-minute break to collect ourselves before continuing. The breakthrough came about a month into these conversations. We were reviewing our budget when I noticed my wife had allocated money toward a weekend trip, something we hadn't done in ages due to our financial situation. When I questioned it, she didn't get defensive. Instead, she explained that she'd picked up extra shifts specifically to fund this small getaway. I realized something important, she said. If we only focus on debt repayment without any joy, we'll burn out. This trip is small, budgeted, and paid for in cash. It's as much about rebuilding our relationship as it is about having fun. That moment revealed something crucial. Financial healing and relationship healing had to happen simultaneously. We couldn't fix one without addressing the other. The weekend trip became a symbol of our new approach, mindful, transparent, and balanced. These conversations weren't always smooth. We had setbacks. There were nights when old hurts resurfaced, and we retreated to separate corners of the house. But each time, we found our way back to the kitchen table, back to those 5-minute turns of uninterrupted speaking and attentive listening. What surprised me most was how this communication technique spilled over into other areas of our relationship. We started using the same approach to discuss career decisions, family dynamics, and future plans. Our judgment-free zone financial created for financial discussions. Those initial raw conversations for how we handled all difficult conversations. But we needed something more structured to sustain our progress. Ever wonder how couples actually maintain financial transparency after the big emotional breakthroughs? Our solution wasn't complicated or time-consuming, but it changed everything. When you're rebuilding financial trust, consistency matters more than grand gestures. We discovered that a simple 30-minute weekly ritual created the foundation we needed to actually follow through on our promises of transparency. This wasn't just about tracking numbers. It was about creating a judgment-free space where we could regularly face our finances together without retreating into shame or defensiveness. I'll be honest, establishing this routine was one of the hardest parts of our recovery. Those first few money dates were awkward and tense. We'd sit at the kitchen table with our laptops open, barely making eye contact, both dreading what might come up. My wife would fidget with her coffee mug while I'd repeatedly check my phone, looking for any excuse to escape the discomfort. I almost canceled 3 times before our second meeting, my wife later admitted. It felt like willingly walking into a minefield every week. But our financial therapist insisted we stick with it, promising that consistency would eventually create safety. She was right. By the 4th week, the tension began to ease as the routine itself became predictable, even when the financial revelations weren't. So what exactly did this system look like? Let me break down our 3-step approach. Step 1, the weekly money date. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., we'd meet at our kitchen table for exactly 30 minutes, no more, no less. Setting a time limit was crucial because it prevented these sessions from becoming all-consuming emotional marathons. We'd light a candle, my wife's idea, to signal this was a different kind of conversation space and put our phones in another room. The structure was simple but carefully designed. We alternated who would lead the conversation each week, giving both of us practice in taking responsibility for our financial health. The leader would guide us through our agenda, while the other person committed to listening without judgment. That no judgment rule was absolute. No eye rolling, no sighing, no I told you so comments. Even positive judgments like great job were initially off limits because they implied we were evaluating each other's worth based on financial performance. Instead, we used neutral acknowledgments. I hear you, or thanks for sharing that. The most powerful part of step 1 was establishing what we called our financial constitutions, the guiding principles for how we wanted money to function in our relationship. We each wrote down 3 values that would guide our financial decisions. Mine were security, freedom, and growth. My wife chose integrity, balance, and joy. These became our North Star when conflicts arose. Step 2, the 3 questions. Within our 30-minute format, we structured the conversation around 3 deceptively simple questions. First, what bills and expenses are coming due this week? This question forced us to look ahead, rather than just reacting to financial fires. We'd review upcoming bills, transfer money to the right accounts, and make payment plans for anything we couldn't cover immediately. Second, what unexpected expenses or income changes should we discuss? This was our space to bring up anything that hadn't been planned for. A surprise car repair, an opportunity for overtime, a friend's wedding invitation that would require travel costs. The key was discussing these things before they happened, not after someone had already made a unilateral decision. Third, what financial wins can we celebrate? This question transformed our mindset completely. Even in our darkest financial moments, finding something to celebrate, paying a bill on time, resisting an impulse purchase, or putting $20 toward debt gave us the emotional fuel to continue. We'd literally high-five across the table for these small victories. The genius of these 3 questions was their simplicity. We didn't need complicated financial jargon or intimidating spreadsheets to get started. The structure was accessible enough that we could maintain it even when emotions were raw, yet powerful enough to gradually transform our entire financial landscape. Step 3, the transparency tool. The final component of our system was what we called our financial dashboard, a shared spreadsheet that gave us a single source of truth about our money situation. This wasn't just another budget tool. It was specifically designed to rebuild trust through complete visibility. We created separate tabs for debts, income, expenses, savings goals, and what we playfully called our financial freedom tracker, a visual representation of our progress toward becoming debt-free. The dashboard was accessible to both of us at all times, with a strict agreement that neither would make changes without discussing them first. What made this different from regular budgeting apps was how we customized it for emotional safety. For example, we created a no-questions-asked allocation of $50 per person each month, money we could spend without having to explain or justify it. This small allowance for privacy within our transparency system prevented feelings of suffocation. We also color-coded entries based on their emotional impact. Red for expenses that caused stress, yellow for necessities that were neutral, and green for spending that brought genuine joy or moved us toward our goals. This visual system helped us see patterns in how money affected our emotional well-being, not just our bottom line. I never realized how much I was spending on things that didn't actually make me happy, my wife said one night, looking at all the red entries for impulse purchases. This awareness shifted our conversations from how much we were spending to why we were spending, addressing the emotional needs behind financial decisions. As months passed, our financial check-ins evolved naturally. The 30-minute limit gradually extended to an hour as the emotional charge decreased and the conversations became more productive. We started incorporating longer-term planning, first 3 months ahead, then 6, then yearly goals. By month 6, we'd expanded our 3 questions to include future-focused discussions. What financial skills do we want to develop? How can we increase our income? What lifestyle changes would give us more freedom? These forward-looking conversations transformed our financial check-ins from damage control to dream-building sessions. The most unexpected outcome was how this structured transparency created a deep sense of partnership. When my wife got a raise, her first instinct was to call me immediately. Not because she needed to report it, but because she was excited to celebrate with her financial teammate. When I found ways to cut expenses, I couldn't wait to show her how it would accelerate our debt payoff timeline. This system worked because it created psychological safety around a topic that had been emotionally dangerous for us. The consistent structure, limited time frame, and judgment-free zone allowed us to bring our full, honest selves to the conversation without fear of rejection or criticism. The budgeting method that eliminated our debt. With our communication system firmly in place, we faced our biggest challenge, yet actually eliminating the mountain of debt that had nearly torn us apart. Here's something financial experts rarely mention. The most mathematically perfect budgeting system might be the absolute worst choice for your relationship. Our breakthrough came when we finally broke the rules. The first budgeting method we tried was the classic 50/30/20 rule. 50% for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings and debt repayment. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Within 2 weeks, we were fighting over what counted as a need versus a want. Is a haircut a necessity or a luxury? What about that office lunch when you forgot to pack one? We abandoned it after just 1 month. Next, we attempted envelope budgeting, allocating cash to different spending categories. The problem? My wife hated carrying cash, and I kept borrowing from other envelopes when mine ran empty. Plus, it didn't work for automatic payments or online shopping. Another failed experiment that left us frustrated and no closer to tackling our debt. Our third attempt was following a strict line-item budget, tracking every penny in meticulous spreadsheets. This approach was a disaster for our recovering relationship. We'd spend hours arguing over a $4 coffee purchase, or why someone needed new socks this month instead of next. The rigidity was suffocating our newfound communication. After 3 failed methods and countless arguments, we were ready to throw in the towel. That's when our financial therapist suggested something that sounded counterintuitive. What if we created our own hybrid system that prioritized our emotional relationship with money rather than mathematical perfection? This led us to develop what we called our emotional zero-based budget, a modified version of zero-based budgeting that accounted for both practical reality and psychological needs. Traditional zero-based budgeting assigns every dollar a job before the month begins, ensuring your income minus expenses equals zero. But we added crucial emotional safety valves that made all the difference. First, we each got a no-questions-asked personal spending allowance, $100 per month that we could spend on absolutely anything without judgment or explanation. This might sound small, but it was revolutionary for us. Having this pocket of financial autonomy meant we could buy things that mattered to us individually without feeling controlled or monitored. It created breathing room in what otherwise felt like a suffocating financial recovery process. Second, we built in what we called reality buffers, extra padding in categories where we historically overspent. If we consistently went over budget on groceries, instead of beating ourselves up, we simply accepted that our initial estimate was wrong and adjusted accordingly. This removed the shame spiral that typically followed when we failed to stick to unrealistic targets. The third key element was our emotional impact rating for purchases. Before making any non-essential purchase over $50, we'd rate it on a scale from 1 to 10 for how much joy or value it would bring to our lives. This simple practice helped us become more intentional about our spending and understand each other's priorities better. I learned that my wife's monthly book club purchases scored a 9 on her joy scale, while my occasional tech gadgets barely registered a 5 for me. For tackling the actual debt, we went against conventional financial wisdom again. Most experts recommend the debt avalanche method, paying off highest interest debts first to minimize interest payments. Mathematically, it makes perfect sense. But psychologically, it was soul-crushing. Instead, we embraced the debt snowball approach, paying minimum payments on everything while throwing extra money at our smallest debt first, regardless of interest rate. The quick win of completely eliminating one account gave us the emotional momentum to keep going. Sure, we paid a bit more in interest, but the psychological boost was worth every penny. We tracked everything using the Inab, You Need a Budget app, which transformed how we managed money together. Unlike other budgeting apps, Inab's philosophy aligned with our emotional approach. It focused on giving every dollar a purpose without rigid category restrictions and offered a judgment-free way to adjust when life happened. The mobile app meant we both had visibility into our finances at all times, which eliminated the information imbalance that had contributed to our problems. What made this approach work when nothing else had was simple. It acknowledged that money is emotional. By creating a system that respected our feelings about money rather than forcing us into a purely logical framework, we could finally work as a team instead of opponents. Each small debt we paid off became a joint celebration. I still remember the night we made the final payment on my first secret credit card. We toasted with sparkling cider and felt a shared sense of accomplishment that was more meaningful than any date night we'd had in years. Month by month, our debt began to shrink. The first year, we paid off $15,000, less than we hoped, but more than we thought possible. The second year, as we refined our system and increased our income through side hustles, we knocked out another $20,000. By the 30-month mark, we made our final debt payment, a moment I'll never forget. What surprised us most was how our shared financial goals created a new kind of intimacy between us. Planning for debt freedom required deeper conversations about our future than we'd had in years. What kind of life did we want? What mattered most to us? What were we willing to sacrifice temporarily to create long-term freedom? The crucial budgeting method that helped us eliminate our debt wasn't about perfect mathematics or rigid discipline. It was about creating a system that honored both our financial reality and our emotional needs, combining zero-based budgeting principles with psychological safety valves that prevented the budget from becoming another source of relationship strain. The surprising emotion that healed our trust. While our budget finally worked on paper, the emotional ledger between us remained deeply in the red. What's the one feeling you'd never associate with financial recovery that actually became our relationship's saving grace? It wasn't forgiveness, patience, or even love that rebuilt our shattered trust. It was something entirely unexpected that emerged from the trenches of our financial battlefield. Even with our new systems firmly in place, emotional trust remained fragile for months. I'd catch my wife double-checking my work on our shared spreadsheet. She'd hesitate before sharing financial information, as if preparing for another bombshell. These small moments stung, but they were completely understandable given what I'd put her through. I initially believed forgiveness would be the key that unlocked our healing. I apologized constantly, sometimes with words, other times with small gestures, making her favorite meals, handling errands she normally did, leaving little notes around the house. Don't get me wrong, apologies and forgiveness were necessary parts of our journey. But they weren't enough on their own to rebuild what had been broken. What actually bridged the gap in our relationship wasn't what any marriage, counselor, or financial advisor suggested. It was shared pride, that feeling of accomplishment when we tackled a financial challenge together and won. The first time I noticed this shift was when we paid off our smallest credit card, a store card with a $2,700 balance. We'd been making double payments for 3 months, cutting back on takeout, and canceling streaming services we barely used. When we made that final payment together, something magical happened. We high-fived awkwardly at first, then broke into genuine smiles that reached our eyes for what felt like the first time in forever. "We actually did it," she said, her voice filled with a mix of surprise and satisfaction. "Together," I added. And in that moment, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since before my financial betrayal. A flicker of trust, small but unmistakable. This shared achievement created a new kind of intimacy between us. It wasn't based on romantic gestures or physical connection, but on proving through consistent action that we could face challenges as a unified team. Each financial win became a brick in rebuilding the foundation of our relationship. When we reached our first emergency fund goal of $1,000, we celebrated with a picnic in the park. Nothing extravagant, just sandwiches and sparkling water. But sitting there on that blanket, planning what our next financial target would be, I realized we were engaging in a form of intimacy that had never existed in our relationship before. We were dreaming together again, something that had disappeared long before my financial secrets came to light. The real breakthrough came 6 months into our journey when my wife's car needed unexpected repairs costing $1,200. Before our financial crisis, this would have been a disaster, either secretly charged to a credit card or causing a major fight. Instead, we sat down together, looked at our emergency fund, discussed the options, and made the decision to use the money we'd saved specifically for situations like this. "Remember when this would have been a catastrophe?" she asked as we drove home from the mechanic. "It would have meant another secret credit card charge," I admitted. She was quiet for a moment before saying, "But now it's just a bump in the road, not a cliff we're about to drive off. That night, I realized that solving a problem together had created more trust than a dozen apologies ever could. The pride we felt in navigating this challenge, as a team was rebuilding something I feared was permanently damaged. Our growing financial confidence spilled over into other areas of our relationship. We started making decisions together about everything, not just money, but career moves, family plans, and even small things like weekend activities. We developed a habit of celebrating every financial milestone, no matter how small. Paying off a medical bill meant a movie night at home with special snacks. Reaching a savings target earned us a nice dinner out, with a predetermined budget, of course. One evening, after we'd made significant progress on our debt, my wife shocked me by suggesting we tackle my student loans next instead of hers, even though mine had a slightly lower interest rate. Her reasoning? Your student loans cause you more stress, and I want us both to feel free. This moment of selflessness showed me how far we'd come, from hiding financial information to making decisions based on each other's emotional well-being. The most powerful moment came when we paid off the credit card that had started it all, the one with the initial weekend getaway charge that began my spiral of secret debt. As we submitted that final payment, my wife reached for my hand. "I'm proud of us," she said simply. Those 4 words carried more healing power than anything else in our recovery journey. Not "I forgive you" or "I love you," but "I'm proud of us." The sense of accomplishment we shared had transformed our relationship from 2 individuals with separate financial lives to true partners. This shared pride created a positive feedback loop in our relationship. Each financial win made us more confident in tackling the next challenge. Each challenge we overcame together strengthened our belief that we could handle whatever came our way. The vulnerability that once felt dangerous now felt like strength. We weren't hiding our weaknesses anymore, but using them to grow together. By the time we eliminated the last of our debt, our communication had transformed completely. We no longer needed formal check-ins to discuss money. Financial conversations became as natural as discussing dinner plans. The fear and shame that had surrounded money talk was replaced by a collaborative approach that felt almost like a game we were playing together and winning. Looking back, I realized that our financial recovery actually gave us something we never had before, a shared identity as a financial team. Before my deception, we were 2 individuals who happened to share expenses. After our recovery, we became partners with common goals and a shared vision for our future. This isn't to say the journey was always smooth. We had setbacks, unexpected expenses that threw off our plans, disagreements about priorities, moments when old doubts crept back in. But each time we faced a challenge together and overcame it, that sense of shared pride grew stronger, cementing our bond in ways I hadn't thought possible. I remember the night we made our final debt payment. We sat on our porch with glasses of champagne we'd been saving for this moment. Instead of wild celebration, we were quiet, taking in the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. "You know what's weird?" my wife said. "If you had asked me 2 years ago what would fix our marriage, I never would have said paying off debt together." I laughed. Not exactly the romantic solution they write about in relationship books. "But it worked," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "We're stronger now than we ever were before." And she was right. The shared pride we developed through our financial recovery didn't just heal old wounds. It created a deeper connection than we'd ever experienced. We learned that trust isn't just built through words, but through consistent actions and shared victories. We discovered that facing challenges together handling income inequality bond without resentment can't be replicated. Even as we celebrated our debt-free victory, a money issue remained that could silently poison our relationship from within. The income gap between us created an unspoken tension that budgeting apps and spreadsheets couldn't fix. We needed to answer a question that haunts millions of couples. When one partner earns significantly more, what actually feels fair to both sides? After we eliminated our debt, I was earning almost twice what my wife made. While we were thrilled about our financial progress, this income disparity created a new set of challenges. Our paychecks might have been different sizes, but we both put in the same amount of effort at our jobs. When I got a substantial promotion 6 months after our final debt payment, the gap widened even further. At first, we tried the most common approach, splitting expenses 50-50ths. It seemed logical on paper, but in reality, it left my wife constantly stressed about money while I had plenty of breathing room. The math was equal, but the emotional burden wasn't. She was contributing the same dollar amount, but sacrificing a much higher percentage of her income. Every bill felt heavier for her. So we switched to the proportional method, where we each contributed the same percentage of our incomes toward shared expenses. This approach works great for many couples, but for us, it created a different problem. I began feeling resentful that I was putting in significantly more money while having the same say in decisions. Meanwhile, my wife felt like she wasn't contributing enough despite giving the same percentage as me. The breaking point came during a discussion about a kitchen renovation. I caught myself thinking, well, I'm paying for most of this, so I should get to decide what we do. The moment that thought crossed my mind, I knew we had a serious problem. Money was becoming a power dynamic in our relationship, and that's exactly what we had worked so hard to avoid. We needed a system that wasn't just mathematically fair, but emotionally fair too. Our financial therapist helped us realize that the problem wasn't in the calculations. It was in our mindset. We were treating money as a scorecard in our relationship rather than a tool for our shared life. That's when we developed what we call the yours, mine, our system. Instead of focusing on how to divide expenses, we completely restructured our approach to shared finances. We created 3 accounts: individual accounts for each of us and a joint account for household expenses. Here's how it works. We each keep 20% of our individual incomes in our personal accounts to spend however we want, no questions asked, no judgment allowed. The remaining 80% of both our incomes goes into our joint account to cover all shared expenses, savings goals, and investments. This system instantly changed the feeling around money in our relationship. My wife no longer felt the burden of stretching her smaller paycheck to match mine. I no longer felt like I was subsidizing our lifestyle without proper acknowledgement. We both had complete autonomy over our personal spending money while working together on our shared goals. The beauty of this approach is that it acknowledges an important truth. Fairness in relationships isn't always about equal numbers. It's about equal sacrifice and equal voice. By contributing the same percentage rather than the same amount, we're both making comparable sacrifices for our shared life. Another key element we implemented was how we handle unexpected money. Bonuses, tax refunds, and cash gifts follow the same 80-20 rule. 80% to our shared goals and 20% for personal use. This prevents any feelings of "I earned this extra money, so it's all mine" that can create resentment. When I received a substantial year-end bonus last December, we applied the 80-20 rule without hesitation. The majority went toward our shared goal of a home down payment, but I also used my 20% to buy the guitar I'd been eyeing for years. My wife was genuinely happy for me because she knew the system was fair. When she receives extra money, she gets the same freedom with her portion. One of our most powerful discoveries was implementing what we call the financial feelings check-in. Once a month, we ask each other, "How are you feeling about our money situation right now?" It's different from our regular financial check-ins because it focuses exclusively on emotions, not numbers. During one of these check-ins, my wife admitted feeling uncomfortable about always ordering the cheapest menu item when we went out to eat, even though our meal costs came from our joint account. We hadn't realized this subtle power dynamic was affecting her enjoyment of our date nights. We addressed it by creating a date night fund in our joint account specifically designated for enjoying meals together without price anxiety. We've also learned to recognize and value non-financial contributions to our partnership. When my wife spends hours researching the best deals on home insurance or takes time to meal plan and shop strategically to reduce our grocery bill, she's making valuable contributions that don't show up on a paycheck but significantly impact our financial health. Similarly, when I handle our tax preparation or spend a weekend doing home repairs we'd otherwise pay someone to complete, those contributions have real financial value. By acknowledging these efforts explicitly, we ensure neither of us feels like the junior partner in our financial relationship. What makes this system work is regular calibration. Every 6 months, we review the 80-20 split to make sure it still feels fair to both of us. When my wife went back to school part-time to advance her career, we temporarily adjusted to an 85-15 split for her to accommodate her reduced hours at work. This flexibility ensures our system grows with us rather than constraining us. The most surprising benefit of our approach is how it's completely changed conversations about career decisions. When my wife was offered a job she was passionate about that paid slightly less than her current position, she felt free to take it without guilt. Since our system is percentage-based, her career satisfaction became the priority rather than maximizing every dollar. Similarly, when I was considering a lateral move that would mean better work-life balance, but no immediate increase in pay, I didn't feel trapped by being the primary earner. Our system gave me the freedom to prioritize quality of life over income maximization. For couples facing income disparity, I'd offer this advice. Create a system that values contribution over dollars. The person making less money isn't contributing less to the relationship. They're contributing the same percentage of their resources. When you frame finances this way, you preserve equality in the relationship regardless of who makes what. The second piece of advice is to keep having those uncomfortable conversations about money feelings. Resentment grows in silence. When either partner starts feeling uncomfortable about money dynamics, address it immediately before it becomes a bigger issue. Third, be flexible. Your financial situation will change throughout your relationship. Promotions, job losses, career changes, children, and countless other factors will shift the money dynamics between you. A good system adapts to these changes rather than breaking under them. What we've ultimately learned is that the best approach to handling income inequality has less to do with spreadsheets and more to do with values. When you agree on what matters most in your relationship, respect, autonomy, shared goals, and equal partnership, the right financial system naturally follows. Where we are now, financial transparency as a lifestyle. Building a fair financial system was just the beginning of our journey. Have you ever wondered what happens to couples 3 years after their financial breaking point? While most return to their comfortable money secrets, we discovered that financial transparency isn't just a crisis tool. It's a lifestyle that unlocked aspects of our relationship we never knew were missing. It's been 3 years since that devastating afternoon when my $40,000 web of lies came crashing down. Today, we're not just debt-free. We've built an investment portfolio that's growing steadily, have a 6-month emergency fund, and are saving for a down payment on our first home. But the numbers aren't what I'm most proud of. What truly amazes me is how natural financial transparency has become. Remember those rigid Sunday night meetings that felt so forced at first? They've evolved into casual conversations that happen organically throughout our week. Just yesterday, my wife texted me about a great sale on winter boots she wanted. Not because she needed permission, but because sharing financial decisions has become second nature. Financial transparency isn't something we do anymore. It's who we are. When I get a coffee on the way to work, I automatically add it to our shared tracking app. Not from obligation or fear, but because being open about money has become as natural as telling my wife about my day. The most surprising shift has been how we've extended this transparency beyond just the two of us. Growing up, money was never discussed in my family. When relatives asked how much I made or what we paid for something, my parents would quickly change the subject, muttering it's rude to talk about money. This created a generational pattern where financial struggles were kept hidden, even from those who might have offered help or guidance. Last Thanksgiving, my younger brother mentioned he was considering a car loan with a 12% interest rate. Instead of nodding politely as financial secrecy dictates, I openly shared our experience with high-interest debt and helped him find a credit union offering rates under 4%. Breaking these generational patterns of financial secrecy hasn't just helped our immediate family. It's creating ripple effects that will benefit future generations. Our transformation has positioned us as accidental financial mentors among our friends. Last month, our closest friends John and Sophia came over for dinner. After a couple of glasses of wine, John hesitantly admitted they were fighting constantly about money. Sophia revealed she felt completely in the dark about their finances. The conversation that followed wasn't filled with judgment, but with understanding. We shared our story and offered practical tools that had worked for us. 2 weeks later, they sent us a photo of their first completed financial dashboard spreadsheet with the caption, "Game Changer." Seeing another couple find relief through transparency has been incredibly rewarding. We're not financial advisors, but our willingness to be vulnerable about our mistakes has created a safe space for friends to seek help before reaching their own breaking points. What's been most unexpected is how financial transparency has enhanced areas of our relationship that seem completely unrelated to money. When you practice radical honesty about something as sensitive as finances, other types of communication naturally improve. Discussions about family planning, career changes, and even household chores have become more productive and less emotionally charged. Last month, I was considering a job opportunity that would mean more travel but higher pay. In our pre-transparency days, I might have made that decision based on what I thought would please my wife or avoid conflict. Instead, we had an honest conversation about the financial benefits weighed against the lifestyle impact. Together, we realized the extra money wasn't worth the decreased quality time. That decision wasn't just about dollars. It was about our shared values, something we've gotten much better at articulating. Our physical intimacy has deepened too. It might sound strange to connect financial transparency with your sex life, but hiding financial secrets creates a pattern of holding back in all areas. When the walls of secrecy came down around money, they fell in other intimate areas too. There's a freedom that comes from knowing you're fully known and accepted, financially, emotionally, and physically. Perhaps the most powerful benefit has been the elimination of power dynamics in our relationship. When one person controls or hides financial information, it creates an unhealthy imbalance that affects everything. Now that we both have complete visibility into our finances and equal say in decisions, our partnership feels truly equal in a way it never did before. We still have our money disagreements, like last month's debate about whether to repair our aging washer or replace it. But these discussions are fundamentally different now. We approach them with curiosity rather than defensiveness, trusting that we're both working toward the same goals. Financial disagreements have become problem-solving exercises rather than emotional battlegrounds. Our financial transparency practice has even changed how we approach major life decisions. We're currently discussing when to start a family, a conversation that would have been impossibly stressful in our secretive days. Now we can openly discuss our financial readiness, career implications, and timeline without the weight of hidden financial pressures distorting the conversation. The system we've built isn't static. As our lives evolve, so do our financial practices. When I started freelancing on the side last year, we adapted our tracking systems to account for variable income. When my wife began pursuing an advanced degree, we adjusted our budget to accommodate tuition payments and reduced work hours. The foundation of transparency makes these adjustments collaborative rather than contentious. One practice that's been especially powerful is our annual Financial Vision Weekend. Every January, we book an Airbnb for 2 nights dedicated to reviewing our previous year's financial journey and setting intentions for the coming year. We bring our spreadsheets, goals, and dreams, creating space to think bigger than our day-to-day financial management allows. It's become a tradition we genuinely look forward to, something I never imagined saying about financial planning. We've also discovered that financial transparency doesn't mean sacrificing surprise or spontaneity. Last summer, I secretly saved from my personal spending money for 3 months to surprise my wife with concert tickets to her favorite band. The difference is that this surprise didn't compromise our financial foundation or values. It worked within our agreed system rather than outside it. What I've learned is that there's a profound difference between privacy and secrecy in relationships. Private purchases from agreed-upon personal funds are healthy. Secret transactions that impact shared financial goals are destructive. Understanding this distinction has given us both freedom within a framework of trust. I won't pretend maintaining financial transparency is always easy. When my wife wanted to help her sister through a tough time with a significant loan, my first instinct was to object based on our savings goals. But our commitment to respectful financial dialogue helped us work through that tension, ultimately finding a compromise that honored both her desire to help family and our shared financial boundaries. The truth is, maintaining financial transparency during good times actually requires more intentionality than during crisis. When debt collectors aren't calling and credit cards aren't maxed out, it's tempting to let regular check-ins slide or make independent financial decisions just this once. But we've learned that transparency is most valuable as a preventative practice, not just an emergency intervention. Our number one piece of advice for couples hiding money secrets. While preventative transparency saved our marriage, most couples aren't reading this until they're already knee-deep in financial secrets. If you're lying awake at night calculating how long you can hide that credit card debt, or sensing something's off but afraid to discover the truth, I want you to know that you're not alone. After helping dozens of friends navigate similar situations, we've discovered one conversation technique that consistently turns financial disasters into surprising turning points. Let's be honest. Coming clean about financial secrets is absolutely terrifying. Whether you're the one hiding purchases or the one suspecting something's off, that knot in your stomach is real. I remember sweating through my shirt the day I finally decided to come clean. My hand actually shook as I reached for my wife's hand across the kitchen table. The fear of her reaction. Would she leave me? Would she ever trust me again? Nearly made me back out multiple times. That fear of consequences keeps millions of people trapped in cycles of financial secrecy. According to a recent study by creditcards.com, 44% of Americans admit to hiding financial information from their partner. And the longer the secret exists, the harder it becomes to reveal. The shame compounds, the potential fallout grows, and the mental gymnastics required to maintain the lie become exhausting. So what's our number one piece of advice after everything we've been through? Start with a financial amnesty conversation, a judgment-free zone where both partners can disclose everything without immediate consequences. This isn't just a feel-good suggestion. Financial therapist Amanda Clayman explains that creating a safe space for disclosure allows couples to move from secrecy to strategy. The amnesty approach worked for us because it separated the revelation from the reaction, giving both of us time to process before making any decisions. Here's how to structure this conversation for maximum effectiveness. First, set a specific time for the discussion when you're both rested and won't be interrupted. This isn't a conversation to have when you're rushing out the door or exhausted after work. Block off at least 2 hours in a private, comfortable space where you won't be overheard or interrupted. Send the kids to grandma's if necessary. This deserves your full attention. Second, establish ground rules before anyone starts sharing. The most critical rules include no interrupting, no storming out, no immediate decisions about the relationship, and absolutely no name-calling or character attacks. Write these rules down and keep them visible during your conversation as a reminder when emotions run high. Third, and this is crucial, agree that the purpose of this conversation is information gathering only. Decisions about how to address the financial situation will happen in a separate follow-up conversation at least 48 hours later. This cooling-off period allows both partners to process their emotions and approach solutions rationally rather than reactively. When you're ready to begin, take turns sharing completely. The person hiding financial information should disclose everything. All accounts, all debts, all financial behaviors. Half-truths will only prolong the problem. Dr. Brad Klontz, financial psychologist, notes that partial disclosure often causes more relationship damage than the original secret because it creates a pattern of trickle truth that destroys trust. For the partner receiving this information, your job is simply to listen. You can ask clarifying questions, but save your emotional reactions for after your partner has finished sharing. Remember, you want to encourage complete honesty, and immediate negative reactions will shut down communication. After both partners have shared, acknowledge the courage it took to have this conversation. Financial shame researcher Dr. Breen Brown emphasizes that shame cannot survive. Empathy. Simply saying, "Thank you for being honest with me," even though it was difficult, can be powerfully healing. For couples ready to embrace financial transparency after this conversation, several practical tools can help maintain your new commitment. Apps like Honeydew, Zeta, or Mint allow couples to share financial information while maintaining appropriate boundaries. These platforms provide real-time visibility into accounts, spending patterns, and progress toward goals. One particularly effective approach is to schedule a financial reset weekend within 2 weeks of your amnesty conversation. Block off an entire weekend to organize all financial documents, create a comprehensive list of accounts and debts, develop a preliminary budget, and research resources for your specific situation. This isn't about blame. It's about getting organized so you can move forward together. For professional support, consider working with a financial therapist rather than just a traditional financial advisor. Financial therapy addresses both the practical aspects of money management and the psychological components of your relationship with money. The Financial Therapy Association, financialtherapyassociation.org, offers a searchable directory of certified professionals, many of whom now offer virtual sessions. But what if your partner refuses to be transparent despite your efforts? This is unfortunately common and requires careful navigation. First, determine whether their resistance stems from shame, privacy concerns, or something more problematic like addiction or control issues. For shame-based resistance, psychologist Dr. Kelly Moylan recommends using I statements to express your concerns. I feel worried when I don't understand our complete financial picture, rather than "you're hiding things from me." This approach reduces defensiveness and opens dialogue. If privacy is the concern, consider working with a neutral third party like a financial counselor who can verify information without violating your partner's sense of autonomy. Sometimes having a professional confirm, "Yes, I've reviewed everything, and there are no concerning issues," can satisfy both the need for privacy and transparency. However, if your partner absolutely refuses transparency despite multiple approaches, you need to make difficult decisions about your own financial protection. This might include separating some finances, consulting with a legal professional about your liability for joint accounts, or even reconsidering the relationship if financial deception continues. Financial coach Tiffany Aliche suggests implementing a money boundaries approach. Be clear about what you need to feel secure, what you're willing to compromise on, and what represents a deal breaker for you. This framework helps you evaluate whether your partner's resistance is something you can work with or a fundamental threat to your financial well-being. The most important truth we've learned, and the reason I'm sharing all this, is that the short-term pain of honesty is far less devastating than the long-term damage of continued secrecy. Financial secrets grow like compound interest, becoming more destructive and more difficult to address with every passing day. When I finally revealed my $40,000 secret, the initial conversation was excruciating. I watched the trust drain from my wife's eyes in real time. But that terrible moment, as painful as it was, lasted minutes. Had I continued hiding the truth, I would have lived with that choking anxiety for years, possibly destroying our relationship beyond repair. Looking back on our journey, I'm struck by how close we came to losing everything. Financial secrets weren't just about hidden debt, they were eroding the foundation of our marriage day by day. But the path to transparency gave us something far more valuable than a zero balance. It gave us a partnership where nothing remains hidden. What I've learned is that the true currency of relationships isn't measured in dollars, it's trust. Financial transparency builds that trust daily in ways that transcend money conversations. Each time we share our financial truths, we strengthen the bonds between us. If you're keeping money secrets right now, today can be your turning point. The freedom waiting on the other side isn't just financial. It's the liberation of living without the constant weight of deception. Take that first step. Your relationship and your future self will thank you for it.